that the other side inspires to bridges, that a dream keeps us awake, that grief makes us human, that we risk to become healed. Amen. Welcome to worship at Warwick Unitarians on what is a lovely, fine summer's day. We'll begin our worship with our opening hymn, number 172, All Are Welcome Here. Please stand as you are willing and able. We value you being here. Whether you are confident and exuberant and bright as the red of a rose, whether you just want to hide away, cover your face, be invisible like the cool grey morning mist hanging above a lake, we welcome you to this place of friendship. Whether you are not sure of anything, full of greys and don't knows, if you feel as dark and as deep mysterious soil, a burnt umber of stillness, you may be full of energy in this moment, fizzling with excitement and hope for the future. A fervent green looking up to the sun. You may feel like a patchwork quilt of complexity, like a river forever changing its color and mood as it flows through different lands and climates. Wherever you are, whatever your color, whatever the intensity of your shade, you are valued here. We are grateful for the richness of you, the you that you bring to this beloved community. Blessed be. Amen. Our first reading this morning is Parable of the Good Samaritan, and will be read for us by Gavin.
The Gospel of St. Luke. Chapter 10, beginning to read at verse 25. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbour as thyself. And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbour? And Jesus answering said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him, and bound him up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbour unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go and do thou likewise.
We will now sing again hymn number 99, Then Jesus Walked. Please stand as you are willing and able for our next hymn. Our second reading is called the Paradoxical Commandments, and it will be read for us by Malcolm.
Paradoxical Commandments by Kent Keith. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you are successful, you win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest ideas. Think big anyway. People favour underdogs, but follow only top dogs. Fight for a few underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help, but may attack you if you do help them. Help people anyway. Give the world the best you have, and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have anyway.
Thank you. Let us now sit and listen as some music is played for our reflection. I'm going to tell you a story now. This is quite an old story. It takes place in a forest somewhere, and in the forest there's a lion. But it's okay because the lion is asleep and its head is resting on its paws, a bit like this, but more lion-like. And a little tiny mouse comes unexpectedly upon the lion. Oh my, the mouse is frightened. Unfortunately, in its fright, it kind of accidentally runs across the lion's nose. This wakes the sleeping lion, and the lion does not like, let me tell you, does not like being woken up from a delightful nap like this. And so the lion put his huge paw right down on the tiny mouse, ready to kill it. And the mouse said, because obviously mice can talk, the mouse said, spare me, please let me go, and someday I will surely repay you. And the lion thought that this was the most ridiculous thing it had ever heard in its long life. How on earth could a mouse ever help him? But the lion was feeling like he was having a good day, he'd got to have a nap, he was in a generous mood, he let the mouse go. A couple of weeks later, The lion was out in the forest again. This time he wasn't asleep. No. He had much more important things on his mind. He was hungry and he needed some prey. In fact, he was so hungry and so in need of some prey that he did not notice the hunter's net that trapped him. Unable to free himself, he filled the forest with angry roaring. The little mouse heard this and scampered over to the lion. She soon found that the lion really was not getting out of this all by himself. So she ran to one of the big ropes that bound the lion. She gnawed it through until it parted. And then the lion was free. "You laughed," said the mouse, "when I said I would repay you. Now you see that even a mouse can help a lion." Let us join once more in the spirit of prayer. May the spirit of compassion help us to feel the suffering of the peoples and the creatures of the world. May the spirit of love melt the cold heart that tramples on human rights. May the spirit of beauty help us to preserve the unique splendors of each country. May the spirit of wisdom help us to treasure the mystical insights of all religions. May the spirit of patience and endurance strengthen those who are oppressed and exiled from their homes. May the spirit of courage strengthen those who speak for those who have no voice. May the spirit of non-violence bring healing, peace, and justice to all the peoples of the world. May the spirit of unity help us to recognize people of every nation as brothers and sisters, and our unity with all creation. Let us enter now into a spirit of stillness and shared silence. Then said Almitra, "Speak to us of love." And he raised his head and looked upon the people, and there fell a stillness upon them. And with a great voice he said, "When love beckons to you, you follow him, though his ways are hard and steep. And when his wings enfold you, yield to him. Though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you. And when he speaks to you, believe in him. Though his voice may shatter your dreams as the north wind lays waste the garden. For even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you. Even as he is for your growth, so is he for your pruning. Even as he ascends to your height and caresses your tenderest branches that quiver in the sun, so shall he descend to your roots and shake them in their clinging to the earth. Like sheaves of corn, he gathers you unto himself. He threshes you to make you naked. He sifts you to free you from your husks. He grinds you to whiteness. He kneads you until you are pliant. And then he assigns you to his sacred fire, that you may become sacred bread for a sacred feast. All these things shall love do unto you, that you may know the secrets of your heart, and in that knowledge become a fragment of life's heart. But if in your fear you would seek only love's peace and love's pleasure, then it is better for you that you cover your nakedness and pass out of love's threshing floor into the seasonless world, where you shall laugh, but not all your laughter, and weep, but not all of your tears. Love gives naught but itself, and takes naught but from itself. Love possesses not, nor would it be possessed, for love is sufficient unto love. When you love, you should not say, God is in my heart, but rather, I am in the heart of God. And think not you can direct the course of love. If it finds you worthy, it directs your course. Love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. But if you love and must needs have desires, let these be your desires. To melt and be like a running brook that sings its melody to the night. To know the pain of too much tenderness. To be wounded by your own understanding of love. And to bleed willingly and joyfully. To wake at dawn with a winged heart and give thanks for another day of loving. To rest at the noon hour and meditate love's ecstasy. To return home at eventide with gratitude. And then to sleep, with a prayer for the beloved in your heart and a song of praise upon your lips. think, is a day for stories. We've heard a couple of stories already. The story of the Good Samaritan, which I'll come back to in a bit, but also the story of the lion and the mouse. In this story, firstly, the lion does a good turn for the mouse, and then the mouse does a good turn for the lion. Obviously, that's not a true story in that didn't actually happen as real events. I've got another story for you. This one is true. It's about an army doctor during the Second World War. The sector where he was stationed saw some of the fiercest fighting of the war, and both his regiment and another division with whom they were fighting suffered really heavy losses. At one point, this army doctor, he even ventured into no man's land to rescue wounded soldiers when no other officers had dared. Finally, when there was no let up in the shelling, he took the decision that the field hospital he was working in had to be evacuated. That operation across 5.5 miles of bogland saved 600 men. That is truly a story of helping your neighbour when it is really needed. It has, for me, a really interesting twist. The army doctor in question was part of the Finnish army in the early 1940s. Finland, as I'm sure you know, is kind of sandwiched between Sweden on one side and Russia on the other. And indeed, Finland has been ruled by each of them. It only became independent from Russia in the early 20th century. In the winter of 1939, Russia, the Soviet Union, invaded Finland, and they fought a short war called the Winter War. Hostilities broke out again between the Soviet Union and Finland at exactly the same time as they did between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. And on the principle that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, Finland, the democracy, and Nazi Germany, not a democracy, were allies. So what happened in our story is that our Finnish army doctor rescued wounded German soldiers, and the 600 men he saved included members of the German SS. And we British people were on a different side in that war, but we know perfectly well that heroism can be found anywhere. Oh, but what I haven't mentioned yet is that Jewish people were completely free to serve in the Finnish army. The Finnish army doctor who risked his life to save so many Nazi soldiers and members of the SS who fought alongside him, he was Jewish. Let me tell you another story. This is much, much more recent. You might even have seen this story in the news in the last few weeks. It takes place in Texas. There's a guard looking after prisoners in a court holding cell, and the guard collapses. On seeing this, the prisoners somehow manage to break out of the cell and attract the attention of those outside. Loads and loads of guards and police officers come rushing in. They escort the prisoners very carefully back to the cell. They perform CPR on the collapsed man. He was then rushed to hospital and I understand has since made a good recovery. The actions of the prisoners saved the life of that man. And it wasn't without risk to themselves. Texas is a truly beautiful and fascinating place, but it is not known for its lenient treatment of prisoners. The stills from the CCTV show that they were shackled hand and foot and wearing very delightful stripy prison uniforms. And of course, all the guards and police officers, they have guns, right? You know this, they will have guns, and you will also know that those guns can and will be used. So in breaking out of the cell and attracting the attention of those outside, those prisoners absolutely risked being shot. And in such an enclosed space, that certainly meant risking being killed or seriously injured. And yet they helped the prison guard anyway. And another little story. At this time, I think it was in Oxford, there was a homeless man. He regularly slept in the doorway of a particular shop, and one night the shop was targeted by thieves. The homeless man raised the alarm, the police were called, everything was saved, and the shopkeepers didn't lose any money. These stories bring us onto the story of the Good Samaritan. I imagine most or even all of you are familiar with the story. You may well already know the context, but I'll share it again in any case. Jesus is asked by what I would describe as a smart aleck lawyer. Jesus is asked who his neighbour is, and instead of giving a straight answer, he tells a story. He starts the story by having us picture a man travelling the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. The original listeners would have known that this was a relatively dangerous road to travel alone, with a serious risk of attack from robbers and bandits. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens to the man. Fortunately, 3 people pass him with the opportunity to help. The first 2, who have impeccable religious credentials, just walk on by. But the third man does stop to help. All well and good. But the third man is a Samaritan. This is important information. The lawyer the story is being told to is almost certainly a first century Jew, and I reckon he has pictured the man travelling down the road from Jerusalem to Jericho as being like him, one of us. In first century Palestine, Jews and Samaritans were in an ongoing religious and ethnic dispute. Each considered the other unclean, heathen, beneath them, usual sort of nonsense. A Samaritan helping a Jew was completely unexpected. As unexpected as a Jew helping a Nazi soldier or a Texas prisoner helping a guard. And so the lawyer realizes that the person who acts as a neighbor, not just, it could be anybody, but could be someone he looks down on and despises. And so what does it tell us? It tells us that loving your neighbor goes beyond the people you know and like. It goes beyond that story of the lion and the mouse and helping the people that helped you first. It means not just helping people you dislike, but helping people who dislike you. But it also suggests that when you need a neighbour, the person who is there for you may be unexpected, someone you have disliked or not previously considered an equal. And that can be really uncomfortable. The story of the Good Samaritan itself ends with the rescuing of the man and his being tended in the inn. But real life doesn't end anything like neat stories. In Oxford, the homeless man, he ended up doing pretty well. Word got around, some people set up like a kind of one of those internet donation thingy-majigs. And they managed to buy him like a houseboat, and he lives there, and he's doing much better. In the case of the Texan prisoners and the guard, apparently the guard is incredibly grateful for the help of the prisoners. And you can be sure the authorities have reinforced the wall of that holding cell, so this can never happen again. In the story of the Jewish army doctor who saved the lives of Nazi soldiers, he was offered the Iron Cross, Germany's great military honour. So he's having a conversation with his Finnish, so presumably in Finnish, but anyway, having a conversation with his commanding officer, told, you've been awarded the Iron Cross, and the army doctor says, hold on a sec, Do they actually know that I'm Jewish? And the commanding officer says, don't know. Let's ask them. Good question. So the commanding officer, he goes back to Berlin and he says, that guy you wanted to give the Iron Cross to, he's Jewish. Is that a problem? And Berlin, well, I don't know exactly what Berlin said, but the award of the Iron Cross, that still stood. The army doctor there, he had friends and family living in German-occupied Europe. At the time, he couldn't possibly have known the extent of the Holocaust, but he knew that people were disappearing and they weren't coming back. He declined the Iron Cross. But bringing it back to us, what do we do when we need a neighbour and the person that helps isn't the person we imagined would? What if they're from a group that we sort of secretly or quite verbally don't usually consider to be equal to us? How do we treat that individual? What do we now think about that group? One option is to be grateful but carry on as if nothing happened. I guess in some circumstances that might well be the right response. Those Texas prisoners may have been thanked for their help, but the process of the law still needs to be followed, and if and when convicted, they'll need to serve their time. That kind of feels right. I'm not super familiar with the legal process in Texas. Maybe it's the sort of thing that could go into like some kind of testimony of someone's character and be weighed in the balance when deciding on an appropriate sentence. Another response is to reward the individual, as with the homeless man on the boat and the army doctor and the Iron Cross, and kind of sweep under the carpet the group that they belong to. And that might be right. But I usually think it's right to do something a little more. When I was a kid, I went to a church and we used to sing a hymn, which I won't sing for you now, but it had a line in that went something like, "We do not ask you, Lord, who is our neighbour." And I look around at the world and I think that is nonsense. We should be asking a lot more. In principle, we do realise that our neighbour might be anyone, and we believe that we ought to help. We ought to show mercy to anyone. In practice, everyone needs to be reminded a lot. We need to be reminded that although it's convenient to put people into groups, homeless, Jewish, prisoners, foreigners, asylum seekers, actually each of the people in that group is an individual. They have individual hopes, fears, motivations, and aspirations. And they each have intrinsic value and worth. We need to be reminded that these groups that we like to put people into are more often meaningless than they are useful. That lazy stereotyping causes more problems than it solves. We need, above all else, to be reminded that no one is beneath us, that we ought to judge people on the content of their character above anything else. We need to be reminded to look past our own prejudices and ideas, to see the real people that are there. We need to be reminded that when we need a neighbour, help may come from the most unlikely source. And because our neighbour can be anyone, when it is anyone, when it is someone from a group that we do not think positively about, I think we need to kind of look again at our views about the group as well as the individual. We need to think to ourselves not just, oh, this one was okay, or they're an exception to the general rule, but actually consider whether we hold unfair prejudices against the whole group as well. This is really difficult, especially for those of us who consider ourselves liberal, because we like to think we don't make this mistake about as many people as we used to. It's actually really, really hard to look at your own ideas and beliefs about people and consider that they may be wrong. But if we want to have a fair and just world, if we want to create beloved community, if we want to build the Republic of Heaven here and now, then it's something we must do. It's difficult to admit that not only were you wrong about an individual, but that you have or a group, but that you've treated people badly or unfairly as a result. It's much easier just to brush that all under the carpet, shy away from examining your underlying beliefs and prejudices. Much easier to cling on to old ideas and ideals, even and especially in the face of strong evidence that they are false. But being open to new experiences, being open to new ideas, is everything that Unitarians are called to do. Having questions and not answers is who we are. And I think that means questioning not only our religious beliefs, but also our attitudes and ideas about people. The story of the Good Samaritan taught the lawyer that his neighbour might be anyone who shows him mercy, that they might come from a group that he looks down on and despises. May it teach us the same. And beyond this, may it also teach us to look beyond labels at individuals and to look beyond our prejudices to people. Amen. Let us sing together our final hymn, number 191, To Worship Rightly. Hymn number 191. Please stand as you are willing and able. May all that we do, and all that we say, and all that we think, be worthy of our best selves. Let us enter the week renewed and refreshed to share our blessing with the world. Amen.
Amen.